Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into from conflict to connection. We're going to discuss how you can turn an argument into a learning opportunity with your kiddo. And arguments are very natural and very part of the human experience. But first, we're going to introduce a new element to our podcast, and we're going to call it the parenting moment. And this could be either something positive that happened, maybe a funny kid story, or just something that we learned that we either did wrong and learned from, or a mistake we made that we had to correct, just something that happened throughout the week from parenting that is real. Because that's kind of the idea of what we want to bring into this podcast is real life. Parenting is messy, it's fun, it's hard, and we want to bring that to our audience. So our parenting moment is going to come from Selina this week.
Okay, so we try to have family meetings that the kids can bring up situations that are happening in the house. I guess probably more I can bring up opportunities of things that are happening in the house. I try to let them have their fair share of saying what we can do to. The idea is we bring it up, they can come up with solutions to the problem that's happening, like chores getting done, things like that. But we recently, last week, had the opportunity that we talked about what we're going to do for spring break. And it came down to that we were going to, it was between Legoland or Six Flags. And the family voted Six Flags. Well, this week, our 10-year-old brought up the suggestion of he wanted to know if he could protest the previous decision being made to go to Six Flags, that he wanted to have permission to make signs to put throughout the house to protest because he wants to go to Legoland. And also, can he bribe people to sway their decision to go to Legoland? So we voted as a family that it was okay as long as the signs were just on their door, not on other personal items or things like that. He took that as the microwave door. Because it was a door. So there's one there too. But I think it's awesome to see him taking that initiative and coming to the family and bringing up his opinion and seeing if he can have his way and swaying other people with his creativity of protesting. So I guess that'll be a to be continued to see what happens this next week when we discuss it again.
Yeah, he's making his voice heard.
Let's see if his $3 he summoned up will bribe someone with swaying their decision to Legoland. I think he has one on his side already, but
he's going to need more.
Right. But I love that. That is hilarious and good practical life skills, like learning to advocate for yourself. It's an important life skill. So, way to go, Woodruff kid. All right. So let's dive into from conflict to connection. So we first should start off by acknowledging that teens, kids, human beings in general, conflict is a normal thing. And conflict doesn't always have to be necessarily a negative thing. Conflict can also be a positive thing. And I also like to define what conflict is, because I feel like sometimes people get this idea that conflict means arguing or screaming or fighting or shouting or something like that. And really, conflict is just anything where two people have to come together and have an agreement. So if you don't know where to go for dinner, that's conflict and you're resolving it. And so sometimes it can dissolve into an argument or it can dissolve into something big, but most of the time it's pretty simple and it's just healthy and good and a normal part of being human and having disagreements. Where this can get tricky is when it's your kids. I am definitely in the thick of this with my 12-year-old who has very big ideas about the way we parent and a lot of disagreements about some of the rules and the boundaries that we have set for her. So let's get into this. Let's talk about just conflict being a normal part of life.
Yeah, conflict is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing. It's what makes the world go around. If everybody believed everything the same way, it would be a pretty boring place. Conflict drives innovation. It drives new thoughts. It can also drive connection and relationships. So we love conflict as long as conflict is healthy. Conflict isn't healthy when it diverts into name calling and disrespect and unkind things, screaming, yelling, all of those types of things. But conflict, when we understand that people are coming from different points of view, we can look at our parenting moment from this week. We can look at the conflict that's happening within the family and see this idea where some want to go one place and others want to go a different place. And it's a healthy opportunity to explore how those resolutions can be made and how we can come to an agreement so that everybody is as happy as they can be.
Maybe just understanding too what's happening in our minds when we are having conflict. And maybe this is more talking about when it gets heated and we get upset and turns more into that kind of conflict. But what we refer to is it's called flipping your lid, which is kind of hard, I guess, when you're listening. I want you to visualize something. So just visualize your hand. And when your hand is closed, like maybe like a fist, that's what is called like your cortex in your brain. And that's the thinking part of your brain. So when you're having conversation and discussing, your lid is closed. Your cortex is part of your brain is the one that's taking control and you're using thinking. So then when you get upset and you react and you argue, your hand, your fist would flip open. So you're flipping your lid. So it's like your palm is flat open, right? And that is when your cerebellum part of your brain, which is all of your big feelings, is operating. So that's when it's open. So what happens, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but I did just last night, that my teenager flipped her lid. And then what did I do? My lid flipped too. And we're both reacting and speaking and conversing in our conflict with our big feelings. Our cerebellum is the one that's responding, and it was not productive. It was not helpful, and we didn't get to where we wanted to go. And so I like to think that when you get to that point and you're flipping your lid, that's a good time to take a step back and be like, hey, this isn't working. We're both not operating where we want to. And so let's take a break, even a timeout, you could call it. But we're going to take a break and let's come back when we're able to like close our lids again and operate with our cortex, where we're using the thinking part of our brain.
And it is, for the record, also very, very normal for that to happen as well, for conflict to dissolve in ways that we don't want. And again, it's just kind of a normal part of being human, and also a very normal part of raising teenagers, because teenagers and kids in general are really good at pushing our buttons. So yes, we're naturally going to get heated, or we're going to react, or as you said, our cerebellum is going to become activated rather than our frontal cortex, or the decision-making part of our brain. And that's where the connection can come in, because it's a great opportunity to repair, to come back and say, I didn't handle that right. And I said some things that I wish I hadn't. I don't like the way this went. What can we do to fix this? Or, how can I help repair this? Or how can we have a better, more productive discussion? That's where the connection is going to come in, is because you're showing your kid, first, you're modeling good behavior of what real life is like. People get heated, they say things they don't mean. And second, you're showing your kid that you care more about them and you care about the relationship more than what might have been said in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, and sometimes it might seem really awkward, but I've been working on this too and trying to just be like, just go give him a hug. Go hug the porcupine.
Yep.
But I've been surprised by just like, after we cool off, I just give them a hug and it's like they just melt too. And they're like, they don't want that either. They don't want that conflict. They don't want that disagreement and those big feelings going on. So I feel like it helps to just soften that and be able to have that connection, and then work again at coming from a place of love and connection and trying to find a solution.
And it helps us really move from that primitive brain, which is where those big emotions lie, back into our ability to think and process and use logic to make decisions and to communicate. Very, very helpful when we just take that space, give ourselves that space, and also recognize that sometimes we need to give our children that space for them to allow their brains to move from that primitive space back into a thinking and logical space. A little bit more difficult for them to do. Sometimes it takes more effort because of their developmental stage, but it is possible.
And chances are we're probably really good at recognizing it in our kid, more so than we are in ourselves. So, but that's not to say you can't learn and you can't train yourself. And it is 100% okay when your kid does react, or when your kid gets when they say something, it's perfectly reasonable. And you should say, okay, time out. You're clearly very heated about this. Let's take 5 so you can cool down and we can come back and circle this, or just say in the moment, you need to mellow out because this conversation is going to be unproductive. That's a very healthy way to handle it. Or if your kid says something and you are triggered and you're feeling like you're going to have a reaction, it's also okay to say, you know what? I need 5. I don't like where this is going. Both are very healthy approaches to conflict with teenagers.
Yeah, one word of caution there, Liz. When a child is upset and angry, telling them to calm down is never going to help.
Right.
It doesn't help adults. It doesn't help anyone. So the words we use will be important there. And that focus on, hey, let's take a break so that we can relax a little bit and let's come back at this in a few minutes when we can think a little more clearly, is going to be a little more helpful than, hey, you need to calm down, because they're not going to calm down. That again, no. At that moment, they're accessing that primitive brain and not able to use logic and thinking. And so we want to give space for them to move back to that thinking brain.
And maybe sometimes it's as simple as, it looks like you could use a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath so that we can reactivate the thinking part of our brain. And maybe you need more than a deep breath. Maybe you need to go take 10 deep breaths, or you need to take 5 minutes, and both are perfectly acceptable strategies. But no, I agree. Telling someone to calm down usually just makes them more angry. You can't tell me what to do.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get into shifting from a power struggle to problem-solving mindset. Because, I mean, this can be so difficult, especially when your child maybe comes to you and wants to renegotiate a boundary or a rule that you have set in place for them and they don't agree. Maybe it's their curfew and they think that 10:30 on a Friday night, that's way too short. They think they should be able to stay out later than that. And so how can we have a productive, positive conversation rather than just tell me your thoughts?
I would always start with coming from a place of understanding. So why is that important to you? What is the reasoning behind what you want to do, and what are your thoughts on that? And I think sometimes we'll be surprised that there might be a good reason for something. And while maybe we can't change that boundary, maybe they just have something going on this weekend that will push that boundary, and they want to participate in that. And so if we just shut it down, then we're not actually teaching them to communicate. We're not teaching them to manage anything. We're just shutting them down, and we're creating a space where they don't feel comfortable conversing with us about something. So, hey, well, what's happening? Why would you like to change that boundary? What's important to you with that? And we find out, oh, well, my friend is having this party and we're not starting a movie until 9:30. And so it's going to be closer to 11. Oh, well, there might be an opportunity to, move that boundary for Friday night. And so we can come to an agreement. But yeah, just finding ways to understand them and where they're coming from, and then helping them to understand why the boundaries exist the way they do. Because sometimes I just think I should be able to be out later. Well, let's explore why we have the curfews and the time boundaries and why mom and dad have made those decisions, and helping them to understand they still may not agree with it. They may not be happy, but when they have an understanding, it's easier to accept than just a flat out no.
Let me go to the model with this example, because if we think about how our thoughts create our results, our thoughts create our feelings, then we can look at the model in this situation and decide how we want to feel or what we want our results to be. So if our thought is, oh my goodness, why are they trying to get away with this? Why are they pushing the boundary? If that's going to be our thought in this situation, then that's going to create the feeling of like frustration. And then how are we going to react and respond? We're going to shut it down. We're going to say no. So if we can really question and look at our thought, and in any situation that comes to us from our kids, right? If we're going to say we're going to change it to a problem solving mindset, then our thoughts would be something more along the lines of, oh, I wonder how we can come to an agreement on this. Let's see how creative they can be in their way of thinking or what their solution to this problem is. Then that's going to create a whole different feeling in us of like curiosity and understanding, even kind of some humor in that, right? We're going to come from a whole different place to have our results be more of proactive and coming together and connecting and finding that answer together.
And I appreciate what you're saying there, Selina. I want to caution our listeners a little bit in this situation. If our family is used to a conflict resolution that includes arguing and yelling and a lack of conversation, and all of a sudden we start changing the way we handle it, Selina and I refer to this as changing the dance that we're having a little bit. It's going to throw them off a little bit, and it may not go very well the first few times. And so these things that we talk about, when we make big changes in our families, sometimes that actually can increase the conflict a little bit temporarily. But if we keep at it, these strategies and these steps are really about building connection. You know, Selina and I believe deeply in the need for connection. All humans have this need for connection with one another, a connection with ourselves, and a connection with our family. And when we can develop that connection over time through these opportunities of conflict, then it will get stronger. Our children will be more confident in sharing their thoughts and what's happening for them. And we will get better at exploring the whys of what's happening and why they're feeling this way, and trying to understand their perspective, and then make decisions that are based on logic and appropriateness rather than in the heat of the moment.
Well, let's have a real moment here. We've experienced that in our family as we've tried to implement changes and have our children give us perspective and ideas and opinions on what's happening. They're used to us telling them what to do. So a lot of times they're like, don't even know an answer. They don't even have a solution to a problem when we ask them, because they're used to us telling them what to do, that they just don't even know how to find a solution to that. And so sometimes it's frustrating for them too, because they don't have a solution, or they spout out a solution and then later they regret that solution that they gave.
We might have had that experience recently.
And so, and like Jeremiah had said, that, you know, they're used to the yelling and fighting and threatening and punishment. And so that's how they're responding and reacting. And then I'm sitting here like, why am I even doing this? Let's just go back to punishing them. So sometimes that is tricky, and just know that it's normal and that it takes time to change some of those habits that you might have in your family. But just keep trying to do the things that you want to do and learn from it, and be open about how you want to change and how you didn't like how things went, and keep trying to make that connection with your family.
And give them the space to come up with solutions. Sometimes we want a solution right now, and that's just not always a reality. And I'm glad that Selina brought that up. You know, give them a little bit of space. Maybe they need to think about it till tomorrow. They're not used to coming up with solutions. They're not adults. That's not what they've done. And it's probably not what we've taught them often in our homes. Mom and dad give them a solution. Here's the consequence for the poor behavior or whatever it is. But when there's a problem in the home and they have an opportunity to help figure out the solution, there's better buy-in and more connection that happens.
And oftentimes, well, when we rock the boat, we're going to make some waves. And so expect the waves and expect an adjustment period, like you guys were talking about. And when you're trying to create solutions to problems, and, you know, sometimes there's going to be pushback or there's going to be more conflict. Those are just the waves hitting the boat. And so sometimes you have to ride it out. And I appreciate what you said, Selena, of let's just go back to punishing them because that's what works. And that's the easy thing to do in parenting. And oh, believe me, that's been so tempting. It's so tempting to just give in. But if you want genuine and true change, consistency is key. And I know that's easier said than done because consistency has got to be one of the hardest parts of parenting is just consistency because life happens. You get really tired. Other things are going on in the background and you maybe have less emotional capacity to deal with this. And it's so tempting in that moment to go back to, status quo instead of, nope, we're going to be strong and we're going to push through this.
Well, and Liz and Selena, you both hit a really important topic for us and that is that let's go back to punishment. Punishment works. And we know it works. It works in the immediate. It works really well. And we've probably talked about this in the past on the podcast, but it works well, but it damages the connection between you and the child. And it's not as helpful as we might think it is. It gives us immediate results that we're looking for, but it does not have the long-term outcomes that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. And the connection is really what we want our main focus to be on, because I think our long-term goal as parents is to raise healthy, functioning adults who are going to contribute, hopefully in some meaningful way, to society. And that happens by a stable family life, as much stability as you can provide, right? Of having those stable connections. So one thing that kids need to thrive is they need one adult that they can trust. And as long as they have at least that one adult that they know that they can trust and they can turn to, kids can get through a lot and they can bounce back from a lot of unhealthy things. And so that's really what your goal is your goal is to drive that healthy connection and that healthy relationship with your children so that when hard times do come, because they're going to, then you can navigate it together and that you can be that rock and that stable person for your child. Okay, so let's do a bit of a role play here. Let's say your teen comes to you and says and calls you a helicopter parent because you won't let them have a Facebook account or whatever social media account it is. And they come at you with, all of my friends have one. I'm the only one in my entire grade that doesn't. And you guys are helicopter parents and I live under a rock and this is terrible. Why can't I have one?
Hypothetically, when your child says that to you, what are you thinking?
Good call. My child has said that to me, that I'm a helicopter parent and making her live under a rock. But it was, and I know we used this example before, but it was about YouTube because I don't let her on YouTube. My immediate reaction to this.
What was your thought? I really want to know.
Oh, I don't remember. This is a long time ago.
Okay, she said it to you right now. What are you thinking?
Am I doing something wrong? Is going to be my immediate reaction is, am I doing it wrong? Am I actually preventing my child from some learning experience or from making a social pariah out of her because of this? So that's going to be my initial response. And I think that would be more of the reactive part of my brain kicking in. And hopefully the logic part of my brain is going to come back and come to the forefront and then think, okay, I'm doing this for safety. And even if we go back to the social media account or the social media example, it's the same thing. It's a matter of safety. And so I think my goal is going to be, how can I help her understand why I'm doing this? Which I think I have before, because I came at her with, we do this for your safety. And she's like, yeah, but eventually I'm going to have to be able to use it. Eventually I'm going to use YouTube, or I get to use it at school. And so she comes up with more and more reasons why she thinks she should be able to use YouTube. Or they might come up with, for social media, more and more reasons why they think they should have a social media account at the age of 11 or 12 or whatever the age may be.
Well, so let's go back to your initial thought. Your initial thought was, oh, am I doing something wrong? Am I holding her back? And so how does that make you feel when you think that?
Well, it makes me wonder, am I doing this out of control or safety? Am I doing this because it's easy or because it's right?
Okay. So that's still a thought. So how does that make you feel? Like a one word? Like, does that make you feel scared, worried, happy?
Probably more annoyed than anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then how are you going to like respond, or how are you going to react? What's your action?
I'm probably more likely to be annoyed and say, we've had this discussion 5 times before. My answer hasn't changed. The answer is no, you're not getting YouTube or a Facebook account.
Yeah. Right. So not connection. So your result is not connection. So your thought isn't creating that connection that you want. So if your goal is connection, then you're going to want to have your thought to be something that would make you to feel more connected or more calm or more understanding or curious, right? So a thought could be like, I wonder why she thinks this is important. Because when you're thinking this is a problem, that's how you're going to respond, and that's what your result's going to be. But if you're thinking more of like you want to connect with her, your thoughts are going to be more something like, I'm not really opposed to this. Of course she wants to be on YouTube. I understand why she wants to be on YouTube. I wonder why this is so important to her. I wonder how we can work together so that we can understand why this is important in our family. And then that's going to be your result, is you're going to have that connection and more understanding and work together with her. So if you came to her with that more of like, even if you asked her like, why do you think that mom and dad don't want you to have YouTube? And you can ask her those kind of questions and help her to understand.
Which I really like that strategy, because it goes back to helping kids find the solution. Because like you guys have mentioned before, we're so used to just giving them the solution or just solving the problem for them. The answer is no, because it's for safety. Well, what do you think? Why do you think we're doing this? And so it's teaching them to think critically, and it's also teaching them to think about another person's perspective, which is a hard skill to develop in young kids. Kids don't naturally do that. They don't naturally consider other people's perspectives. They tend more towards thinking about themselves. And again, it's just a normal part of development. But if we can help them think about another person's perspective, then we're more likely to have that connection.
Let's look at that and analyze that just for a moment, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about it being difficult for them and helping them to see somebody else's perspective, all while we haven't considered their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what this examining of our thoughts and our feelings and our results helps us to do, is to see it from their perspective. Now, when you ask your child something like, well, I wonder why it's so important for you to have YouTube, their logic and reasoning is going to be very immature. And it's going to be childish, but it's still valid because it is what they're experiencing. To us as adults, it's going to be hard to accept that. But here is an opportunity, and I love Selina using the model here because it is a powerful model. And in addition to that model, here's an opportunity to look at compromise, especially when we look at YouTube, right? Is everything on YouTube bad?
No.
Is Liz operating from a place of fear when she doesn't allow her children to have access to YouTube at all?
Right.
You are, because you're talking about safety, right? So where's the compromise? If everything on YouTube isn't bad, then there are some things that are good. How can we compromise? How can this child have access to something that they want, and they can also remain safe and be locked away from some of the problem things that do exist on YouTube?
In their experience in their world, they haven't probably experienced the yucky, crazy, unsafe part of the world. So in their mind, that's not even going to be
a valid
concern or a solution to a problem. It's not a problem because that's not part of their world.
Now, we understand as adults that they don't always choose that, right? And the other reality is that our children are going to be exposed to things that we don't love or like, or that we absolutely loathe. And again, there's an opportunity for connection here, because when they do experience some of those things, now we get to have a conversation, because they're going to. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And now we get to have a conversation about those, and we deepen the connection. We deepen the relationship. We build trust with one another. But what we don't build is trust when we just shut them down.
Right.
And just, nope, you can't do it. No, you can't have social media. I am very opposed to young children having social media accounts at all. I don't think it's healthy. And there may not be room for a compromise there. And that's okay too.
Right.
But if we also take the time to understand and explore where they're coming from, again, they may not be happy when they walk away from the results, but we can still create the connection through having conversation and trying to see things from their perspective and helping to learn what they're experiencing. And especially social media, they're going to have access to it at some point, right?
Right.
So now we can even start talking about, well, what does that access look like in the future? What can we have to look forward to so that we can start to build on that connection and build the opportunities that are going to come eventually for social media. Certainly, we don't want to just turn social media on for them all of a sudden when they're 18 and they haven't been in our care to be able to watch and oversee that and help them navigate that in a healthy way.
Right. And another thing too that comes to mind as you're talking about all this is people love to feel understood. And there's something really powerful in feeling like you're understood. And that applies to kids. And so often I think we're used to just getting into this mindset of, I'm your parent, therefore I know what's best. And while that may be true, that's not the way kids are always going to see it. And oftentimes we can come across as a dictator who just wants to be a helicopter parent and just control everything that their children do. And so helping them to feel like they have a voice in the situation and at least like they're heard can, again, be really powerful in finding that connection. And I also like that you brought up that there's not always room for a compromise. For example, maybe it is the social media or and this could work with young kids. Like, let's say maybe your young kid comes to you and says, I think I should be able to eat ice cream for dinner every single day. That's obviously not going to work. I mean, you can't just say, oh, yeah, sure, let's explore that. But you can say, okay, well, tell me about it. Tell me why you're thinking this. Why do you want to eat ice cream every day for dinner? What do you think would happen if you ate ice cream every day for dinner? Letting them be a part of the conversation rather than just saying, no, eat your vegetables, because that's not what kids want to hear.
Being a part of the conversation is so critical. It gives them place in the home. It gives them a place in the family. They feel welcome. They feel like they're a part of it. And the idea of just always shutting them down, even if they want to have ice cream for dinner every single night, it really is damaging to the connection. It breaks that connection. It breaks it down. And what ends up happening is, I guess I can't trust to tell mom and dad something that I want that's out of the ordinary or something that's interesting to me. And we become more and more likely to isolate away from mom and dad or from whatever parent and less likely to share really important things with them versus having that connection where they are more likely to share, especially when it comes to those more serious conversations that will eventually come.
And so another thought that I had too, that I want to circle back to with this YouTube thing is, and it stems from what you said, Jeremiah, about the fact that they're going to be exposed to something that is either dangerous or we don't agree with, or maybe that just isn't good, that needs a discussion. And if I am just constantly sending this message to my daughter, YouTube is bad, it's bad, it's bad. When she does come across something, she's less likely to share it with me because I have sent her this message over and over. It's bad. And so now she might start to think she's bad. Whereas if I can find an opportunity, and because I had thought about this and something that and a solution that I've considered, and again, this is what would work for my family and for me. This may not work for every situation, is maybe I can come up with a playlist for her. I can put together a playlist and I can say, okay, you can watch these videos, but you need to be at least within earshot, right? I need to be able to just kind of at least see and hear everything that you're saying and doing. And that way, if you do come across something, we can talk about it. Or if you have questions, we can talk about it. Because the reality is there are some really great things on YouTube, right? There's lots of great ways to learn. There's drawing videos, drawing tutorials. There's all sorts of cool things that you can do on YouTube, but there has to be a balance and there has to be a compromise that's going to work for everyone.
I love that, Liz, but could we maybe take that one step further? See, you've come up with the solution without including her at all. Right? And so even though you may already know the solution, here's a great opportunity. The next time that comes up, hey, let's talk about that. I'm curious, what makes you want to watch YouTube? Oh, all these great things. Well, I wonder, honey, if we could come up with an idea in some way where you could possibly see some of these YouTube videos that you want to see. And allow them to drive that change. And you're going to direct it, and you're not going to allow it to go just unrestricted access all of a sudden to everything. But now they're included in the conversation. The connection happens. That's very, very different than if you just come to them and say, I've decided this is what we can do. We didn't actually help the connection. And in fact, we've hurt it more because now mom is flip-flopping. Oh, she finally gave in. She's tired of the pressure. That's what works. Now you've reinforced all that behavior of pressure, and you haven't taught compromise, conflict resolution, conversation, connection. You haven't taught any of those things, but if you include them, you have.
Absolutely. I love it. Okay. Final conclusions, final thoughts.
I think it's been a great conversation today. I sure enjoy these things. And if any of our listeners would like help, please reach out to us. We'd love to chat through some of these situations. We offer coaching, distance coaching through online or video conference sessions. And if you want to reach out to us, we can always be reached at coreconnection.org.
You can also contact Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff at 208-557-1227. I will have that phone number posted in our show notes as well, along with their website. And there's a really handy button at the top that says book a free consultation. So if you're interested in that, you will have all that information in the show notes. Okay, so next week we are going to have a little bit of a continuation from this week. We're going to get into the power of listening, and we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.